Chapter 221, Bad Luck. Fujin finally gave up on the wolves. He made a hand sign and ended his jutsu. In the next second, he appeared back in the training ground. Exhausted, he went home and took a long rest. A few days later, Fujin once again tried his luck. Summoning jutsu. Fujin disappeared from his basement. He looked around and the scene made his skin crawl. He couldn't help but curse, first that never-ending wolf tide. And now this? No wonder so few have the summoning jutsu. It's fucking dangerous. As soon as Fujin appeared, he saw innumerable mosquitoes around him. He couldn't even estimate their number. He nervously asked, "Do you have a leader who would be willing to discuss a summoning contract?" Fujin thought, "Though I don't like mosquitoes, they have a lot of potential. If I can summon millions of mosquitoes, I can have similar skills as the Abarame clan without having to host insects in my body. However, I first need to see the effectiveness of these mosquitoes. For starters, how much chakra would it require to summon a sufficient number of mosquitoes? And, do they have poisons like the bugs? Or do they have other means of attack?" Unfortunately for Fujin, the mosquitoes just dived at him without exchanging any words. Fujin sighed expecting such a response. Winds began flowing all around him. A dome of wind formed around Fujin which spun at a high speed. The mosquitoes attacked the dome and were ripped into small pieces as soon as they entered it. Their remains were tossed outside right away. Hundreds of mosquitoes died every second. Fujin sighed once again, another suicidal bunch. Fujin lost all interest in the group. He made a hand sign and cancelled the summoning jutsu and returned to his basement. He muttered, "No wonder so few ninjas have summons. If most of the summons are like them, it will be waste of time and risky at the same time." He hadn't wasted much chakra against the mosquitoes. He used the summoning jutsu once again and disappeared. This time, he landed in a rocky area. There were huge boulders around Fujin. And on top of those boulders were hyenas. Fujin was standing in the center and there were 8 hyenas surrounding him. Fujin looked at them and wondered, so will these guys talk? This time, Fujin didn't have to wait for long to know the answer. All 8 hyenas stood up and stared at Fujin. One of them exclaimed, "A human popped up out of thin air." Another hyena licked his lips and said, "Yeah, we didn't even have to go hunting for him." Another said, "Since this is a free meal, he should be delicious, right?" Fujin was relieved to hear them speak. But soon his left eye twitched. He said, "I was trying to sign a summoning contract." "Who is your leader?" The first hyena that had spoken asked excitedly, "Do you mean that we can summon humans like you and not have to hunt for a meal ever?" Fujin's left eye twitched again. He sighed and said, "Just take me to your leader." The hyena said, "Sure." However, at the next second, he pounced on Fujin. Having dealt with 2 annoying groups, Fujin was high on alert and low on patience. He dodged and kicked the hyena away. Surprisingly, the hyena flipped in the air and landed on his legs on a boulder. He exclaimed, "This one fights well. Brothers, we will have a good hunt tonight." Fujin muttered, "Great, another group of battle maniacs." He spread his chakra field. Surprisingly, there were only 16 hyenas in a 1.3 kilometer radius. Fujin wondered, is this a small pack? Or is the territory of these hyenas so huge that only 16 live in such a large area? As soon as the hyena yelled, the remaining 8 arrived and encircled Fujin. However, none of them attacked Fujin. Fujin prepared himself for another fight. However, his eyes widened. Lightning began appearing on the bodies of every hyena. It flowed on their bodies. Fujin thought, what the hell? They can use lightning. In the very next second, Fujin flickered. A paw pierced into the back of the afterimage he left. Fujin's face became grim. They are too fast. All 16 hyenas ran towards him at a very high speed. Their speed wasn't any lower than the speed at which Fujin flickered. Fujin kept flickering to prevent himself from being surrounded. At the same time, one sword appeared in his left hand. Without looking, he slashed it at the hyena on his left. The hyena didn't bother dodging as the sword was quite far from him. However, his eyes widened as he saw a sword slash coming at him. He immediately got out of the way and barely dodged the sword slash. Unfortunately, that wasn't all. The sword slash was surrounded by sharp winds that hit the hyena. The winds cut into his flesh, making him bleed all over. The hyena was enraged and began chasing Fujin once again. He shouted, "Be careful of his sword slashes." The other hyenas made a note of it mentally and kept attacking. Fujin also observed the hyena as he was on a run, so the lightning just increases their speed and perhaps their attack too. Their defenses aren't enhanced. However, his hide is too tough for a hyena. Normal attacks won't have much effect on it. He kept running while attacking with flying slashes. Fujin was very impressed by the hyenas. They are good. Very good. They have excellent coordination, very high speed and a strong attack. And they keep fighting despite injuries without letting them affect their speed. With the addition of their cunningness, they might just be the perfect summons. Fujin swung his sword towards the rock below him and sent a flying slash towards it. The slash cut the boulder and sent dust and small pieces of rocks flying towards the hyenas. Due to their high speed, the hyenas couldn't dodge and ran into the rocks and dust and were blinded momentarily due to the dust. Fujin used this opportunity to flicker a far distance from them and stopped moving. The hyenas took a couple of seconds to get rid of the dust in their eyes and chased after Fujin once again. Fuji stood on a boulder as he saw the hyenas come at him. They moved so fast that if a normal person saw, he wouldn't see anything except lightning flashing across the boulders. Fujin built up around 5% of his chakra. Wind release, infinite breakthrough jutsu. Fujin exhaled a massive and strong wind at the hyenas. Seeing their bloodlust, Fujin didn't hold back. The attack left deep cuts in the ground as it moved towards the hyenas. The hyenas saw the strong winds heading towards them and barked loudly. However, to Fujin's ears, they sounded like cackling laughter. Fujin was surprised as all the hyenas let out an electric wave that clashed with Fujin's attack. Fujin had the elemental advantage, however, he was facing 16 opponents by himself. Both attacks cancelled each other. The hyenas continued their hunt and moved right through the dust raised by the clash of their previous attacks. Fujin used the smoke screen to fire air bullets at the hyenas. As soon as the hyenas exited the smoke screen, they felt air bullets heading towards them. They immediately dodged, however, they were too close to the attack. 2 air bullets hit the legs of a couple of hyenas and left a hole through it. Another 8 air bullets left cuts on the hyenas. Only 5 hyenas were completely unharmed. They immediately went on the attack while the others took time to breathe. A hyena appeared in front of Fujin and swung his paws at his head. At the same time, another 2 hyenas appeared on Fujin's side. Fujin moved backwards as defending would mean that those 2 hyenas would attack him. The paw hit the boulder on which Fujin was standing and completely destroyed it. As Fujin moved back, he swung his sword at them and launched another sword slash. The hyenas immediately jumped to dodge. However, Fujin fired air bullets at that very instant at the hyenas who were airborne. This time, the hyenas weren't unaware of the threat. They opened their mouths and fired small lightning balls at the incoming air bullets. The attacks cancelled each other out. Fujin furrowed his eyebrows. I will run out of chakra at this rate. And they aren't allowing me any time to cancel my summoning jutsu and return back to Konoha. As he was thinking, one of the hyenas, who was earlier injured, appeared at Fujin's right and pounced on him. Fujin saw as his lightning-enhanced paw moved towards his body. At the same time, the 5 hyenas facing him also pressed on the attack. Fujin extended his right arm towards the incoming paw. As his hand moved forward, chakra appeared in front of his palm. It took the shape of a ball and began rotating at a very high speed. At the same time, chakra flowed erratically through the sword in his left hand as he swung it at the hyenas coming at him. The hyenas expected another flying slash. However, this time no slash was sent flying. Instead, strong winds were generated that were incredibly sharp and spread in all directions in front of Fujin. The hyenas noticed the deep cuts the winds left in the ground and were terrified. They immediately ran in the opposite direction. The winds lost their power after traveling 25 meters, but that was sufficient time for Fujin. The paw and the raise-non clashed. The hyena expected to crush the ball and the human as well. However, the raise-non easily overpowered the paw. The lightning around the paw dissipated as the raise-non hit it. The hyena let out a painful howl as the raise-non hit. The momentum of the hyena carried it into the raise-non. The raise-non caused his leg to bend towards its stomach. Fujin slammed the raise-non into his stomach and sent the hyena backwards along with the raise-non. After moving for a couple of meters, the raise-non exploded. The hyena's skin was the thinnest in his belly area. The explosion ripped through the skin and blew his internal organs. Blood and flesh hit the rocks behind the hyena. When the smoke cleared, the hyena's dead body could be seen on the ground. His once solid stomach had been ripped open, exposing the shattered remnants of its internal organs to the elements. The flesh around the stomach hung loosely like a torn and deflated bag. The gruesome sight made the remaining hyenas shudder in revulsion. They all looked at each other. Fujin noticed it and prepared himself for an even fiercer confrontation. However, his eyes widened and a stunned expression could be seen on his face as he saw the hyena's action. Chapter 222, This World is Freakishly Scary. Fujin's eyes widened and a stunned expression could be seen on his face as he saw the hyena's actions. After looking at each other, every hyena nodded and looked at Fujin with a fierce expression. However, at the very next moment, every single hyena escaped in different directions as fast as they could move at the same time. Merely in a couple of seconds, they escaped Fujin's range of sight, and soon after they escaped Fujin's chakra field, leaving him standing alone with the remains of a dead hyena. After a few seconds of disbelief, Fujin sighed and muttered, "Such shameless beasts." Despite what he said, he couldn't help but think that they would have been the perfect summons for him. He looked at the dead hyena and thought, it looks like there are only these 16 hyenas here. The mountains shouldn't have any more hyenas. Even if they do, considering that I have killed one of them, I don't think I'd be able to sign a contract. He sealed the dead body of the hyena in a scroll while thinking, in my previous life. I recall reading a lot of fantasy books that stated that eating the meat of strong beasts was very helpful for developing a stronger physique and improving aptitude or energy. I wonder if it also applies here. I know eating Kurama's meat can provide a lot of benefits. I wonder if the same also applies to summoning animals. It'd be very helpful if my flesh became as sturdy as his and my lightning affinity improved. He made a hand sign and cancelled his jutsu and returned to his basement. He left his house and went to a store from where he had previously bought recipes. The shopkeeper looked at him and politely asked, How can I help you? Fujin asked, do you have a recipe for cooking hyenas? The old shopkeeper looked at Fujin with a weird expression. Fujin ignored it and asked, do you? The shopkeeper replied, wait a few minutes. He began searching through his records and finally found what Fujin was looking for. After searching for the book, he returned and handed it to Fujin and said, surprisingly I do have one. It also involves details of how to properly clean it. Fujin thanked the old man and paid for the book before leaving. He cleaned and prepared the hyena's flesh for a few hours before cooking some of it and storing the rest in the fridge. As he ate, he noticed, there is not much difference in taste as compared with goat meat. Fujin spent the next few days resting and eating the hyena's meat. However, he was disappointed as he didn't notice any change after 3 days. He thought, what a bummer. I haven't felt any improvement in my physique or the power of my lightning jutsus. I guess only the flesh of tailed beasts will provide benefits. Though it makes sense, I suppose. I doubt I am the first one to eat an animal that can use chakra and an element. If it did provide any benefits, this would have been common knowledge and every clan would be procuring such meat to strengthen themselves. I'm sure summoning animals would have already gone extinct by now due to everyone's greed. Having had enough rest, Fujin prepared himself for another attempt to get a summon. He ate a soldier pill and used the summoning jutsu. He disappeared from his basement. Unlike his previous 3 attempts where Fujin appeared a bit high in the air, this time he felt something around him. He felt a massive pressure on him and his clothes and body got wet instantly. Fujin opened his eyes to see that he was underwater. In front of him was a giant wall or an underwater mountain. Multiple small and colorful fishes were swimming around him. Fujin immediately held his breath and cursed in his mind, shit. He spread his chakra field to see how deep he was in the water. His chakra field spread to its max limit. Fujin's eyes widened in terror as he looked at the wall in front of him. He realized, this isn't a hill. It's a fucking whale. A fucking 200-meter long whale. Despite his chakra field spreading for 1.3 kilometers in all directions, Fujin's chakra field didn't escape the water. Realizing how bad his situation was, he immediately waved hand signs. As he did, he noticed another giant whale swimming towards him. The small fish that were around Fujin immediately began running away. However, the giant whale opened its mouth and a strong suction force was felt by Fujin. The water, the fish, and even Fujin himself were sucked towards the whale's massive mouth. At the last moment, Fujin disappeared and returned to his basement. He dropped to his knees and began breathing heavily as water fell from his clothes and body on the floor. After taking a few deep breaths, he sat down and muttered, so freaking scary. He took deep breaths and calmed himself down and analyzed, no wonder so few have summons. If encounters like this one are common, then unless the summoner is a formidable ninja, surviving will be very difficult. If I had appeared there half a minute later, then I'd be sucked into the whale's mouth right when I appeared there. Fujin immediately began doubting himself. He thought, should I still try to get a summon by myself? At the current rate, the risks of trying to get a summon seem to far outweigh the benefits of getting it. After all, this time I was sent to such depths inside the ocean. What if I am sent inside a volcano or something very poisonous? Fujin began weighing his options. Despite the risks, getting a summon would be incredibly helpful for him. Especially as his chakra kept growing. He wondered, should I instead try to get a summoning contract from existing summoners? But whom? Snakes and toads will be very difficult to get as I have no contact with Jiraiya or any snake summoner. The only 2 who I know decently well are Renjiro and Hiruzen. But Renjiro's sloth isn't very powerful. More importantly, he hasn't given any indication to pass me the summoning contract. As for Hiruzen, it is even more unlikely. If I could become Tsunade's student, then I could get her summons. But even that is quite improbable. Not to mention, she won't be in the village for many years. Fujin analyzed his options but didn't find anything promising. He sighed and decided, there is no option. I have to keep trying it until I am successful. However, I have to take more precautions. It'd be a waste of a life if I get attacked as soon as I go there and can't do anything to resist. He began planning how to defend himself properly. After forming a good enough plan, he went to the ninja weapons shop. After searching for a bit, he bought 2 metallic bracelets, 2 metal anklets, 1 metal torque, 1 metal headband and 4 flexible bands that were reinforced with metal. He returned home and began inscribing barrier seals on each of the items he bought. When he was satisfied, he created a shadow clone. The clone began equipping the items. He put the bracelets on each of his wrists, just behind the bracers. The anklets went above his ankles while the flexible bands were put on his thighs and biceps. The remaining 2 went around his neck and forehead. The clone looked at Fujin and nodded. In the next second, Fujin shot a vacuum bullet at the clone. The clone instantly made the confrontation hand seal. A barrier appeared around him. The bullet hit the barrier. The barrier stood sturdy, however, the impact of the bullet sent him backwards for a few meters. Fujin nodded satisfactorily and asked, "Did you feel any pain?" The clone shook his head and said, "No, but if the attack is very strong, then the momentum will be passed on to you. So be prepared for that." Fujin nodded and dispersed the clone. The bands fell on the ground. Fujin put it on and used the summoning jutsu once again. As soon as he appeared in the summoning area, Fujin made the confrontation hand seal. A barrier appeared around him. He immediately followed it up with the hand signs of ending the summoning jutsu and observed his surroundings. If he felt something was wrong, he would return instantly. Fujin watched in confusion as his chakra field spread through the area. The first thing he noticed was the small hill in front of him. The bottom of the hill had an entrance like a cavern entrance. 2 imposing, jagged protrusions hung in front of him, like menacing fangs, as if daring him to enter. Suddenly, a strong wind was exhaled from the cave entrance on Fujin's barrier, pushing him backwards by a few meters. His eyes widened in surprise and shock once again as his chakra field covered the hill in front of him. He couldn't help but gulp his saliva and mutter, "This world is freakishly scary." Chapter 223, A Special State. Fujin nervously observed the beast in front of him while maintaining his hand seal. He was prepared to disappear in the blink of an eye. As he was looking up, an eyelid opened and stared right at Fujin. The beast saw Fujin and thought, "I sensed a chakra field engulfing me. Looks like it was this human." The beast observed Fujin and wondered, why is he riling up his chakra and maintaining a barrier? He didn't get up and spoke in a rough and jagged voice, "A human? We haven't had one visit us in a while. Why are you here, little one?" Fujin sighed in relief, finally someone who talks and is reasonable. Though the beast's voice was painful to hear, Fujin didn't mind as he finally could have a conversation with an animal. However, he didn't let his guard down and replied, "I am here to sign a summoning contract." The beast observed him and said, "I see. But why are you maintaining a barrier?" Fujin let out a sigh and answered, "I have been using summoning jutsu blindly to find the right summon for me. Unfortunately, I had some very bad experiences." The beast was surprised to hear the reason. Suddenly, he began laughing out loud in amusement. The sound of his laughter echoed through the mountains with a deafening roar, as if 1,000 thunderbolts were crashing down upon the earth at once. Sweat gathered on Fujin's forehead as his barrier trembled. He cursed, "Shit, without the barrier, I might have gone deaf." His excitement about the thought of signing a summoning contract with such a strong beast quelled down as he began worrying about his life instead. After laughing, the beast stood up. Fujin watched in awe as he saw his majestic body. He was a behemoth of a beast, standing at an astonishing height of almost 20 meters tall. His muscles bulged under a coat of thick, matted fur that bristled in the wind. His sharp, powerful claws were the size of long swords, capable of rending through flesh and bone with ease. But it was the beast's jaws that were truly terrifying, gaping open to reveal teeth that were larger than Fujin's whole body. Each tooth was razor-sharp and curved, like a scythe made of ivory. The ground shook beneath its massive paws as it stood up. This was a predator unlike any other, a true apex predator. Fujin gulped once again as he recognized the beast, a saber-tooth. The beast said, "Drop your barrier and introduce yourself, little one. Don't worry, I won't eat you. You won't even fit the gap between my teeth." He let out a cackling laughter. Fujin agreed with his analysis. Though his barrier was strong, he had doubts about whether it could withstand an assault from the behemoth in front of him. He deactivated the barrier and stopped maintaining the hand sign and his chakra for escaping back. However, he was still alert and prepared to activate the barrier immediately despite doubting its reliability. He said, "I am Suzuki Fujin from Kanahagakure." The saber-tooth observed Fujin and said, "Good name. It suits you well. I am Ryu, the son of Tatsu. Your strongest affinity is wind nature manipulation, right?" Fujin was surprised. He wondered, how did he sense that? Was it just my name or does he have the ability to sense chakra affinity? He nodded and said, "Yes, it is my strongest affinity." Ryu said, "Good. Having a strong wind affinity is one of the necessary conditions to be able to sign a contract with us." Fujin thought, "Lucky me, my other elements are lacking a lot right now." Ryu added, "Of course, that isn't the only criterion. Climb on my head, I'll carry you to our sage. She will determine whether you can sign a contract or not." Fujin's attention was immediately drawn to the word sage. He thought with excitement, "Great, they should be able to use senjutsu." He nodded and used wind instantaneous body jutsu to appear on top of Ryu's head. Ryu said, "Hold on tight." Fujin held on tight to his fur as he expected Ryu to run at high speeds. However, Ryu didn't move. Fujin heard some noise behind him and turned his head to check it. The sight he saw left his eyes wide open and jaw hanging. Ryu's fur moved and two gigantic pairs of wings appeared on his back. The wings fully spread, displaying the immense wingspan which was easily 4 times his height. Ryu flapped his wings and the gigantic creature lifted off in the air. Fujin gulped his saliva as he thought, since when did Sabertooth gain wings? As Ryu took off into the sky, Fujin felt a sense of awe and wonder as he looked out at the stunning scenery before him. The mountains stretched out as far as the eye could see, their peaks piercing the clouds above. Below them, a vast forest spread out, with streams and rivers snaking their way through it like veins. For once, Fujin let go of his worries and relaxed. Seeing how strong Ryu was, he knew that he didn't need to play tricks to attack Fujin. A childlike curiosity appeared in Fujin's eyes as he took in the breathtaking view, feeling incredibly blessed and content. Though Fujin had traveled in airplanes in his previous life, the feeling was completely different. In fact, it wasn't even comparable. Ryu's wings beat rhythmically, sending a gentle breeze through Fujin's hair and filling his lungs with fresh air. As Ryu climbed higher, Fujin could see the snow-capped summits of the highest peaks in the distance, their peaks wreathed in wispy clouds that glowed pink and orange in the light of the setting sun. The sky above was a riot of colors, from the deep purples and blues of the horizon to the golden hues of the clouds that drifted lazily overhead. It was a scene of such majesty and beauty that Fujin felt humbled and grateful to be alive to witness it. As Ryu cruised through the skies, Fujin felt a sense of complete relaxation and tranquility. Fujin basked in the peacefulness of the moment and lost himself in thoughts as he began reflecting on his life. He recalled his recent troubles before beginning to reflect on his entire journey in this majestic world. He recalled the schemes he employed, the people he killed, the fun he had and the hard work he put in. Soon, he began thinking about his previous life. With the newfound clarity and tranquility, Fujin couldn't help but realize, in my previous life, I always dreamed about having superpowers. I dreamt of going on epic adventures. Now that I have superpowers that I could only dream of in my previous life and have an entire new world to explore, why am I so stressed? A smile appeared on Fujin's face as he closed his eyes. Memories of his past and worries about his future faded away, replaced with a sense of contentment and joy. He felt a deep connection to everything around him as though he was becoming one with the natural world. Fujin entered into a special state. His mind was so calm and stable that he could feel the world's energy around him in this state. He lost all sense of time as he enjoyed the comfort of this energy. Ryu, who was enjoying showing off to Fujin, suddenly focused all attention on him. A look of surprise appeared on his giant face as he thought, what the hell? Ryu sensed that Fujin had entered into a special state. He analyzed, what a surprise. I had sensed that he has a very potent affinity to wind. That is why I decided to bring him to our sacred land. This journey was meant to display my might and relax him a bit from his agitated state. But I never imagined that he would be able to connect with nature so easily. Looks like we will have a new summoner after 125 years. Ryu didn't want to disturb Fujin and wake him up from the special state he was in. He maintained a constant speed as he headed towards the tallest mountain. As he moved, he thought in relief and excitement, Great-grandmother, it looks like our pride's ability might finally advance once again after 500 years. He quelled his excitement, though it will be a long time before he can learn that skill. His chakra reserves are too poor. Even the quality of his chakra is lacking. We will need to improve it first and only then can he have some hope in learning it. As Ryu kept cruising, he moved above the clouds. In front of him was a mountain peak. Fujin finally opened his eyes. He saw the snow-covered peak and was awed by its beauty. Ryu noticed that Fujin had woken up and said, "Welcome to Mount Mutki." Chapter 224, Gahayu Murasaka. Fujin observed Mount Mutki carefully. He could feel that the chakra around the mountain felt different as compared to Konoha and other villages. Ryu asked, "So, how are you feeling?" Fujin replied, "I am feeling great. I have never felt better." Ryu said, "Of course. What you just experienced was a special state. And the chakra you feel is nature's chakra. I believe you humans also refer to it as senjutsu." Fujin was surprised. He thought, that was nature's chakra. He fell into a thought as he realized, no wonder I felt so comfortable and my mood was so tranquil. Ryu noticed that Fujin was in thought and said, "You only sensed nature's chakra and didn't absorb it. In the future, don't try to absorb nature's chakra or even try to feel it yourself. It can be very dangerous. Especially as you aren't ready to handle it yet." Fujin nodded. He knew how dangerous nature's chakra was. He replied, "Thanks for the warning. I won't try it without guidance." Fujin wanted to ask a few questions but something caught his eye. He looked ahead to see 4 saber-tooths flying in the sky while playing around. However, compared to Ryu, they were much smaller with heights in the range of 3 to 4 meters. They noticed Ryu and quickly flew towards him. However, their attention soon fell on Fujin as this was the first time they ever saw a human. Fujin too was observing them. They were about to land on Ryu, when he said, "Run along, kiddos. I'll be busy." The 4 saber-tooths immediately flew away. Ryu said, "Don't mind them. You are the first human they saw. So expect a lot of curiosity-filled gazes if you manage to sign the contract." Fujin chuckled, "All right." Ryu flew to the very top of the peak. However, instead of a pointy peak, there was a shallow crater surrounded by the rocks. It looked quite similar to the opening of a volcano, except that the crater wasn't very deep and instead of lava, it was covered in snow. Ryu landed in the crater in front of another saber-tooth. This one wasn't as big as Ryu but was still about 3/4 of his size. And it looked a bit older. The saber-tooth noticed Fujin and asked in a gentle voice, "Which guest have you brought here, Ryu?" Fujin was surprised by her voice. Unlike Ryu, it was much more gentle and pleasing to the ears. Ryu said, "This is Fujin. He came here to sign a summoning contract." "Fujin, get off and introduce yourself." Fujin nodded and jumped down from his head. He landed between the 2 saber-tooths. He bowed slightly and respectfully said, "I am Suzuki Fujin from Kanahagakure. I used the summoning jutsu to find a summon and appeared in front of Ryu." The saber-tooth observed Fujin carefully. Ryu said, "Fujin, she is the leader of our pride. And the sage of Mount Mutki and all winged saber-tooths." Fujin had already expected it to be so. The sage looked into Ryu's eyes before looking at Fujin and said, "Ryu has a habit of being too dramatic. I am Gahayu Murasaki. Everyone in this pride is my descendant." Fujin memorized her name. She continued, "Did Ryu inform you about the conditions of signing a summoning contract with us?" Fujin replied, "He informed me about needing a strong affinity to wind nature. But I don't know about other criteria." Murasaki said, "All right. Before I inform you about the criteria, do you have any questions you want answered?" Fujin replied, "Yes, quite a few." "Is it fine to ask them all?" Murasaki said, "Sure, ask." Fujin asked, "When I used the summoning jutsu, why did I arrive so far away from Mount Mutki?" Murasaki replied, "The summoning jutsu you humans use isn't to find a group of summons but instead a specific summon. In your case, that was Ryu. That is why you appeared in front of him instead of the mountain. Since most summons live in their sacred lands, I believe that you have the misconception that you appear in sacred lands." That information surprised Fujin. He analyzed, "I never thought of it that way. But I guess it makes sense. Though I don't remember well, I think Jiraiya did fall in front of Gamabunta who became his main summon." Fujin looked at Murasaki and asked the most important question, "Can you teach me senjutsu?" Murasaki didn't answer and instead stared at Fujin for a minute. She finally said, "This question is a bit complicated to answer." Fujin furrowed his eyebrows and asked, "What do you mean?" Murasaki replied, "We do have the ability to harness and use nature's energy. However, this technique is only for us winged saber-tooths. A human can't learn it." Fujin thought, even Toad Sage Mode was a technique for toads. But humans could still learn it. Why can't their method be learned? Murasaki broke Fujin's thoughts by saying, "This is one of the criteria for accepting a summoner. We only accept summoners who we believe could learn senjutsu. Though you won't be able to use our technique, we will use it as a reference to help you learn senjutsu. Fujin was confused. He couldn't help but ask, why? Murasaki replied, your human body can't handle our methods. Fujin said, no, not that. Why would you go through so much effort to make a summoner learn senjutsu? Murasaki stayed silent for a few seconds before saying, I can't tell you the reason, but it has become a tradition here. However, I can't give you any sureties in learning senjutsu. After all, in the past 500 years, we have trained many humans. Unfortunately, no one managed to learn senjutsu. Fujin became silent on hearing it and fell into thought. He was very conflicted. He sighed in his mind, what a mess. Looks like learning senjutsu from here will be very difficult. Murasaki and Ryu noticed Fujin thinking and didn't disturb him. Fujin analyzed and reached the conclusion, I guess this isn't bad though. Other than the toads teaching Jiraiya, Minato, and Naruto senjutsu, I am not sure if any other summons teach senjutsu. Though Kabuto did get it, I don't recall exactly how he convinced the snakes to teach him. And Hashirama's sage mode didn't have any explanation. So if these guys are serious about training me to learn senjutsu, that will probably be my best chance. Of course, their help is definitely not unconditional or selfless. I am sure they have their own goals for wanting to train their summoners to use senjutsu. Besides, using summoning jutsu blindly is too risky. I'd have to sign a contract even if they didn't know senjutsu. Fujin said, all right, I will be in your care. However, I have one more question. Am I allowed to sign more summoning contracts? This time Fujin heard Ryu's jagged voice from behind and he sounded offended, kid, why do you want to sign other contracts when you have us? Fujin looked back and calmly said, when I learned about the summoning jutsu, I plan to sign at least 3 summoning contracts. One for fighting on land, one for fighting in the air and one for scouting and spying. But, since you have the ability to fly, I don't need to find another summon to fly. Of course, it was just some plans I made when I was a kid. If you have conditions of not signing other contracts, then I won't. Ryu calmed down on hearing Fujin's answer. He replied with a deadpan tone, you are still just a kid. His reply made Fujin feel awkward. Murasaki answered, I don't care if you sign other summoning contracts. But you can't sign a contract with a group that can use nature chakra. Even if you try to sign one, they won't agree if you have already signed a summoning contract with us. Also, though your plan seems good, don't try it until your strength grows considerably. With your current strength, there are many summons that can kill you with ease. So it will be pointless and risky. Fujin nodded. He didn't need to be told again how risky it was as his memories were still very fresh. Murasaki continued, instead of trying to form another summoning contract, I would recommend raising wild animals and signing them as your contract. That way you won't be under any restrictions and can raise them to do what you want. Fujin was intrigued by the idea. He thought, I never thought of this option. But, to be honest, raising animals will be a lot of work. Especially when I am out on missions. However, I do have a lot of space around my home and I have a lot of money that I don't have any use for. I need to see if I can employ someone to do the work for me. Fujin looked at Murasaki and said, that's all the questions I had, Lady Murasaki. Ryu watched awkwardly at Fujin as he called her a lady. He wondered, this lady is over 800 years old. I wonder when was the last time anyone called her lady. Murasaka said, you can call me Granny. As for your criteria for signing a contract, there are just two. She looked at Ryu and said, the one in front of whom you appear should agree to accept you as a summoner. She looked back at Fujin and said, and you should show talent to be able to learn senjutsu in the future. Fujin thought, as I thought. They gain something from teaching me senjutsu. Ryu said, I agree. And Fujin has passed the second criterion as well. Fujin looked at Ryu in surprise. Ryu said, the flight to this place was a test to see how in tune you can become with nature. My goal was to calm you down and make you experience peace and tranquility by showing you that scenery. As you managed to sense nature chakra, you have passed the criteria. Fujin was left speechless. He thought, first I needed a good wind affinity. And then I needed to feel nature's chakra, which I coincidentally managed to do. I guess good luck does follow bad luck. Fujin replied with a smile, that's great. When do we sign the contract? Chapter 225, Potential and Limit. Fujin signed the contract right away with his blood. Ryu carried him away from the peak and flew down the mountain. As they were flying, Fujin asked, Ryu, are there others like you guys who can use senjutsu but can't pass it on to humans? Ryu replied, of course, there are numerous. The number of species that can use senjutsu is at least a couple of dozen. And there are numerous wild beasts who manage to learn it on their own. Some of them are very wild and dangerous. Even I wouldn't want to face them in a single combat. Fujin was surprised to learn that. After all, he didn't see any such creature make a move during the Fourth Great Ninja War. But soon he realized, now that I think about it, none of the summons made any major moves during that war. The Toads had a larger participation in the fight against Pain rather than against Obito and Madara. Weird considering that they were in danger during the latter rather than the former. Ryu continued, as far as I am aware, only the places you humans consider as the three sacred places have techniques to pass down their methods of harnessing nature energy to humans. Others don't have them or are not interested in passing them down. A giant cave appeared before them. Ryu stepped into the cave and roared loudly. Surprisingly, his roar had no effect on Fujin. Fujin was impressed, what control over his voice. Fujin got off Ryu's head. Ryu looked at him and said seriously, though we don't have any specified rules, there are a few things you have to follow. Fujin nodded. Ryu said, first, none of the winged saber-tooths you summon should die. While we will give our all to help you, we will undo the summoning and return if we face extreme danger and think death is inevitable. This is especially true for the young ones who still need to grow. After escaping, we will use reverse summoning jutsu to save you unless you specifically ask us not to. Fujin nodded and said, that is reasonable. I have no issues with that. Fujin's main priority was always his own safety. So it was perfectly understandable for him when others have similar priorities. Ryu said, another thing, though you can summon me, don't try it until your chakra reserves get much larger. You will need to have at least 5 times the chakra you currently have to summon me safely. In the meantime, Ryu gazed outside the cave. Fujin followed his gaze and saw 3 winged saber-tooths flying towards them. They entered the cave as Ryu completed his sentence, in the meantime, you can summon my sons. Ryu looked at them and said, this is Fujin. He has become the new summoner of our pride. Introduce yourself. The 3 winged saber-tooths stared at Fujin. Though they were smaller than Ryu, they were much bigger than Fujin. The smallest one was almost twice as tall as Fujin while the largest one was half the size of Ryu. The biggest one said, I am Kurogane. You can summon me when you are in an intense fight. He observed Fujin and said, though I would recommend at least doubling your chakra before trying to summon me. The second one said, I am Kaido. I like going on adventures and flying for a long time. You can summon me when you want to travel long distances. The smallest one said, I am Goro. Feel free to summon me whenever you want to. Fujin nodded and slightly bowed and said, I will be in your care. Goro said with a smirk, don't worry, I like to protect the ones weaker than me. He immediately ran away after saying that as his two brothers stared at him in annoyance. Ryu sighed as Kurogane explained, he is quite mischievous. You will have to get used to him. Fujin said, it's fine. Kurogane and Kaido also left. Ryu said, everyone here is an expert in using wind attacks. The nature energy we use amplifies it even further. You can later try to create combination attacks with them. If you aren't compatible with them, you can even summon others from the pride. Fujin nodded and said, all right. Ryu stared at Fujin and said, now, time to discuss the important matter. Fujin looked into Ryu's eyes. He could feel that Ryu was trying to look into every secret he had. Ryu said, I was initially not sure about accepting you and wanted to leave the decision to Granny. I changed my mind after sensing how in tune with nature you became. The reason I was doubtful is that your potential isn't very high. Fujin furrowed his eyebrows and asked, what do you mean? Ryu said, from what I can see, your body and chakra should be stronger than most humans that are your age. However, you have only managed to do so with extreme hard work. Isn't that right? Fujin was uncomfortable at how easily Ryu gained information regarding his chakra and abilities. Fujin nodded, that is true. Ryu said, every being has a limit to which they can grow. For some, it is higher, while for others it is much lower. What you have done through intense training is bring forth all your potential in order to gain power quickly. Due to this, you will soon reach your limit and your chakra reserves will stop increasing. In fact, the speed of the growth of your chakra reserves should have already slowed. Fujin frowned. He thought, I have monitored my chakra ever since I became a censor. My chakra grew by 2 to 3 times every year during the last 2 years in the academy. And it exploded under Renjiro's training due to Senju Taijutsu style training and grew by about 4.5 times in a year. Though I noticed that my chakra growth has slowed and it will grow by less than 2 times this year, I speculated that it was just due to no longer having any gains from training Senju Taijutsu style. If his words are right, doesn't it mean that my growth will drastically slow down? Ryu guessed Fujin's thoughts and said, you don't need to worry about this. After all, you can't control your potential and limits. Fujin argued, but can't we exceed our limits and grow beyond them? In the Fourth Great Ninja War, the strongest ninja was probably the one with the least potential. So though Fujin didn't like what Ryu said, he wasn't discouraged as Guy's example was in front of him. Ryu was impressed by Fujin's reply. He thought, many will be demotivated on learning that their progress will be halted and might deny that their potential is limited. But he directly thought about breaking through the limits. Ryu replied, it's true, it can be surpassed. However, you will just reach your new limits and stop there unless you can keep breaking your limits. Just breaking limits is rare. But to break it consecutively is almost impossible. Of course, there are still beings who have managed to do it and become immensely powerful, but they are very rare. Anyways, we are getting off topic. We can discuss this later when you reach it. What I wanted to say is that your chakra growth will slow down in a couple of years. And when the growth becomes too slow, you will come here and receive my training. Fujin thought, I see. He wasn't trying to demotivate me. Fujin asked in a confused tone, why do we have to wait till then? Ryu answered, because your current chakra isn't strong enough. The techniques I plan on teaching you are very chakra intensive and will put an intense strain on your physique. So you will need at least 3 to 4 times your current chakra and a much stronger physique before I can safely teach you. That is why I will not be training you right now. As for the limit that I mentioned, you don't need to worry much about it. Though your potential isn't very high, your wind affinity is very potent. And we have methods and the resources to make it even stronger. As for chakra reserves, though it is difficult, even they can be artificially boosted. However, it is very troublesome to do so, and the methods that we have are more effective on someone whose growth has come to a halt. In addition, there are various restrictions and limits on those methods, but we will talk about it when you reach the limit. Of course, if you manage to keep breaking past your limits, then I can begin your training after you reach the necessary levels of chakra reserves and physique. Fujin consumed all the information Ryu just stated. He was beyond surprised. He analyzed, he can do that. Increasing wind affinity is understandable if they have access to wind elemental crystals. But how can they increase chakra reserves? At the same time, his mood became a bit grim. Since they are willing to invest so many resources into me, what exactly do they gain from training me in senjutsu? Fujin didn't let his mood reflect on his face. Instead, he showed an excited expression and said, all right, that sounds great. Thanks a lot in advance, Ryu. Ryu said, that is all for now. Return to your place and don't attempt to sense nature chakra without my presence. Fujin replied, don't worry. I won't risk my life pointlessly. Ryu nodded. Fujin waved hand signs and returned to his basement. He looked around himself and let out a sigh, finally. I don't need to experience any more crazy situations like those. Fujin was very happy with the summon he signed. However, a thought appeared in his mind, should I keep my summon